Speed. Everyone wishes they had it. Speed has no substitute. You either have it or you don't. People can improve their running speed very marginally, but for the most part, you have to be lucky enough to have the genetics and live a lifestyle that keeps you in good physical shape. The rest of us can only look on with envy as they who have it benefit from this amazing superpower. In most sports, it pays to be the fastest, the most elusive, and the most agile. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, things are no different in rugby. In fact, one of the main goals of the tight forwards dominating the set pieces, the loose forwards taking care of the rucks, the halfback controlling the game, and the centres holding things together on both attack and defence, is to create the best opportunities for the team to put one of their speedsters into space, so that they can showcase their entertaining abilities and score tries. Some of rugby's most iconic names have worn the action-packed 11 and 14 jerseys. From the blistering speed of Brian Abana, the heart and agility of Shane Williams, or the how the hell did he do that step of Jason Colby. But amongst those great names, there is one player that changed what it meant to be a professional rugby player. He is seen by many as the single most dominant player to have played the game of rugby, and is often the player voted as the GOAT of the game. I speak, of course, of the great, late Jonah Lomu. Lomu was a special player. He was not the best because he was the fastest. He, for me, was the OG and what would become known as the power winger. It was essentially the fact that he was a powerful human that was just fast enough to play wing that made him such a force. If you were big enough to bring him down, you likely would have had trouble catching up to him. Conversely, if you were fast enough to catch him, as most wingers were in those days, you probably did not possess the power and bulk to dominate him in contact. So either way, with ball in hand, he was a destructive force that was hard to stop, regardless of who was unfortunate enough to find themselves in his orbit. I do believe Lomu would not have been as dominant had he played today. Players have come a long way since the 90s in terms of size, power and speed. But we also know it's unfair to compare players across eras. The fact remains, when Lomu played, he was the man, and many would argue no one else was more dominant in their respective eras. The classical winger is an agile speedster who knows in which direction the try line is. But as you may have realised from my past videos, professionalism has changed and added to the demands of many of the positions I have already covered, and wing is no different. Top teams all have very stubborn defensive systems. It is what is needed to be a top team. A system that is hard to penetrate and very tricky to get around. When faced with a defensive system that commands respect, teams are more likely to kick, as both a means to get out of trouble, but also a means to create attacking opportunities. For me, the majority of situations under which teams would elect to kick can be divided into three categories. That is to kick for territory, to kick for a contest, and an attacking kick. Kicking for territory is usually a defensive action. When the team has bad field possession, the quickest way to change that is to kick for territory. Generally, this is done by kicking for touch. Kicking for touch both denies the opposition the ability to either launch a counter-attack or kick the ball back. When they are kicking out of their own 22-metre area, they may kick out on the full. But if they kick from outside the 22-metre area, the ball must bounce before going out. Otherwise, the opposition gets a throw in to the line out, in line from where the ball was kicked, rather than from where it went out. Not a good outcome for the kicking team. So when teams kick for territory outside their own 22, they generally do so when they spot the backfield is not covered sufficiently by their opponents, allowing them the opportunity to bounce the ball infield and carve out some territory. It must be mentioned that there is also a relatively new rule called the 50-22 that turns kicking for territory into an attacking option. The rule states if a team manages to kick the ball from inside their own half and into touch in their opponent's 22-metre area on the bounce, they would be awarded the line-out from where the ball went out. This law was brought in with the intention of forcing the defending team to drop more players back into the backfield to stop the 50-22, creating more attacking opportunities for teams in possession of the ball, as there are fewer numbers up in the defensive line. Now, as you can imagine, when you are facing a team with a good defensive system, opportunities where the opposition does not have the backfield sufficiently covered is limited. This brings us to our next category, kicking for a contest. If teams are outside the 22 and not managing to make ground by carrying the ball, and there is no opportunity to kick the ball out of touch on the bounce, then they are likely to kick for a contest. This is generally done when either the scrum half or a player at first receiver, usually the fly half, kicks a high ball, also known as an up and under in some parts of the world, so that it drops in an area behind the defensive line so that one or more of their players can run to contest for the ball. And the winger's speed makes him perfect for this task. This option gives teams an alternative option when they are not making any ground with the ball in hand. In some situations, team can start losing ground when up against a strong defensive system. So kicking to essentially a 50-50 contest behind the defensive line becomes a very attractive option. Then we have the attacking kick. Now, what constitutes an attacking kick and what constitutes a contest is a bit wishy-washy. In fact, they are often both. But a good example of an out-and-out attacking kick is a crossfield kick for the winger to run onto. Usually, if things go to plan, there won't be a contest for the ball, but rather a clean gather by the winger. This option is especially popular when the team has a penalty advantage. So on defense, wingers fluctuate between being up in the defensive line in order to put pressure on opposition attack and falling back into the backfield to field potential kicks from the opposition. And on attack, they fluctuate between running good support lines to their playmakers on their inside and chasing, contesting and receiving attacking kicks. So wingers that are good at both taking, chasing and competing for high balls are becoming more and more valuable. To a novice looking at rugby for the first time, the winger position looks like a pretty straightforward position. You hang on the side, and when you get the ball, you run hard and fast into space. And whilst that assessment is not incorrect within itself, it is a very limited view. Wingers have to have good positional awareness. They, along with the fullback, need to understand where on the field the game is taking place. When on defense, they need to understand when they need to stay in the defensive line or when they need to drop back to help field potential kicks. Usually the fullback is the player that manages the backfield positioning. So in many ways, the winger is a great position for a new player when they are placed with an experienced fullback. But obviously, a winger becomes more valuable to a team as their positional awareness grows. Where the winger needs to be positionally is driven by where they are on the field and whether their team has possession of the ball or not. On attack, the winger would spend most of their time on the edges of the team's attacking formations. Even if they end up receiving the ball midfield, they often did so after launching themselves from the outskirts. The wide channels also provide a good position from which contestable kicks can be chased down and contested. When the opposition gets possession of the ball close to their own try line, the winger is more likely to be required to fall back, as there is a high likelihood that there will be a kick. Like I said before, the fullback is responsible for the backfield. Fullbacks have the skill sets of 10s, but those skills are utilized to manage the backfield and launch attacks from deep. Having one or more of the wingers back when the kick is expected gives the playmaking fullback running options to try and put into space. But it can also leave the defensive line short up front, so it is not always wise to have both wingers fall back unless it is out of necessity, like the fullback is at the bottom of a ruck and is unavailable to marshal the backfield. Playing wing comes with a lot of accolades from fans. When they get the ball, fans move lift, because they know there is a chance things may get exciting. It is, however, also a position where a lot of players can be left out of the game. Some games are running affairs. The ball gets thrown around a lot and the ball makes it to the winger a lot without the winger needing to do much to attract the ball. But then there are other games which are forward dominated, like games played in the wet or games played between two very strong defensive teams. Or you are playing against a team who are strong in the ruck, so it is risky to throw the ball out wide to isolated players, as there is a high chance of conceding a turnover. These games tend to become games of attrition, and the winger does not see a lot of organic ball. A good winger would recognize these situations and know odds of them getting a lot of passes thrown their way is less likely, and they will most likely need to go looking for work and be ready to chase more kicks. Wings often easy into the game for people new to rugby. You aren't burdened with a lot of rugby technicalities out on the fringes. But of course, not everyone is blessed with the speed to thrive out wide. So opportunities to play out on the wing is limited, depending on your natural ability, the team you play for, and the level of rugby you are playing. Every game has a position every youngster has fantasized about playing in their backyard. The position that attracts novices and veterans alike. Everyone likes the players that bring the action, that bring the entertainment, that scores the match-winning try. There is a reason Lomu was able to transcend the sport of rugby, which is proven hard to do, in a game that, due to its nature, struggles to produce consistent global superstars. It is no coincidence that the first and biggest one the game has produced was a winger.